Welcome to Trinity Radio for another special political episode, sort of, where we talk a little bit about the upcoming election. I want to say, as I welcome Josh Klein and Tim Stratton back to the channel, I want to also say, oh, sorry, I'm hearing my video start up. Randal Rauser, who was the guest last night to discuss these things with Tim and Josh, um, is free. I want you to know, Randal, if and when you see this, that I would happily host you as well. Tim had discussed and Josh had discussed that they didn't get to supply some of the supporting evidence that they would like to support. And so as a courtesy, I said, well, we'll do another episode. If you would like to do that fact check of the fact check, Randal, as I saw you mention on Twitter, I'd be happy for you to come back on. I mentioned to Randal this morning at about 8:30 my time, I sent a DM saying just that when I first heard that we might do this, but that I'm open to that. So, but I wanted to give Tim an opportunity and Josh to clear up anything that they wanted to put out there that got left on the table. And so we're going to do that right now. As we begin, I'll say thank you to Jim Amberg, who we call our channel angel. Why do we call him that? Because on trails, they call the people that help out, the people that are hikers, like on the Appalachian Trail, call them trail angels. Well, Jim Amberg is our channel angel. Thank you, Jim, for that super chat. All right, Tim and Josh, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks again. It's starting to feel like home.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah. Well, you're figuring out what's in the fridge and where the closet is and all those kind of things. And so, yeah, you make yourselves at home. So I don't quite know how this is going to go or how we should approach this, but I think you guys maybe have thought about that more than me. And I know there's things that you definitely want to say. And so I'm going to try not to get in the way of that too much. Yeah. I'll be a part of the discussion if it seems necessary, but I want to let you guys go ahead and just lay out what's on your heart or in your head. And if that takes 10 minutes here, that's fine. If that takes an hour, that's fine too. So you guys just kind of take over Trinity Radio here for a second.
Well, I'd sure love to have you jump in, even if it's not necessary, Braxton, because I know even though you played the role of moderator yesterday, I think you're free to express some of your thoughts and opinions and beliefs here with us today too. And
well, I'm definitely opposed to abortion, and right. I have strong reservations, obviously, about other issues that came up last night and that didn't come up last night. Very conservative. So I don't think that's any surprise to people.
Right. No. And I doubt Randal's surprised either. I thought you were a very fair moderator. And I also thought, the conversation with Randal yesterday was very pleasant. Like I think I said at the beginning, I'm sure a few sparks would fly, but really, I didn't really see any sparks. I just saw some nice disagreement. And my biggest frustration, it was just, there was so much, I think even Randal admitted himself, he kind of did a gish gallop, and I'm fine with that. But the problem was there was so much to deal with in that very short time. And so much fell through the cracks, and I was struggling with knowing what to respond to. I was hoping to really kind of deal with the deductive argument I gave in my opening, and maybe saying what premises he disagreed with and why shouldn't we think the conclusion is true. And we didn't go there, and that's totally fine. It was an informal debate, so it's not like we're keeping score and giving points here or there. I'm totally fine with how the conversation went with Randal, and I'd love to have more conversations with him. But
before you go on, I want to say just one thing that I really want Randal to hear out of this. After we got done last night and I got home, I sent him a message thanking him for this and telling him that, though I think he knows I've disagreed strongly. I don't think I've posted much in response to him, but I disagree strongly with some of the things that he says and posts. I believe that his motivations come from a place of trying to or wanting to care about his neighbor, and I believe that's true. And I hope that he would, consider us friends there in that respect.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want what we're doing here to in any way seem threaten that. If I'm doing something inappropriate by hosting this, I certainly don't intend to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think you are. I think it's just we just want to do some fact checks, and I would love for Randal to have the same opportunity. And I mean, this is just a continuation of a really good conversation that, it was shortened. Josh had to leave a half hour early.
Yep.
and really, in all honesty, an hour and a half isn't enough time to have these conversations. But yeah, so much was said that, I'd really like to spend a little bit more time on some of these things. Josh, let me start by asking you a few questions. It seemed to me,
first, before you ask questions, I want to add my 2 cents in there. That was my first interaction with Randal, and it was very pleasant. There wasn't emotions that flew on a very emotionally charged topic for a lot of people. Yeah. So my participation in this is in no way to cast aspersions on Randal, but it is to say he did throw stuff out there that I either ignored because I wanted to get to kind of the root of the argument, or weren't able to address because of the time. And so I thought, well, since things were thrown out, why not just address them at a later date? Which is why I agreed to do this. It's in no way an attempt to come after the fact and retcon a debate. It's more of a, let's clarify some positions, some things that were said, and why I disagree. So
yeah. So we still contend that it's impossible for an informed and consistent Christ follower to use their power to advance the objectively great evil of the modern day Democrat machine led by Harris and Walz. So that would include casting a vote. It's impossible for an informed and consistent Christ follower to cast a vote for Harris and Walz. And I have asked Josh to write an article going into more depth and detail with these fact checks, including what we might not get to today, but we wanted to get to some of the bigger ones. So Josh, let's start by talking about abortion. It seemed to me that although Randal claims to be pro-life, and we applaud him for that, that he's not as pro-life as we are. And I noted during the debate that he seems to be kind of as pro-life as Trump. He seems to be on the same page as Trump. So it seemed odd to me that he would be calling him inconsistent and things like that. But be that as it may, it seemed like he kind of downplayed a couple of things. Number one, we noted that Harris and Walz would seek to not just overturn Roe, get Roe codified into federal law, but he said that Harris only wants abortion in the first trimester. And that was news to me. It seems like she's been given ample opportunity to make that clear, and she runs from it every time. Also, what really stood out to me is Randal's claim of ontological development, and that, our intuition tells us that if there's a burning building and you have 100 frozen embryos in one room and a toddler in the other room, you save the toddler. If you only have time to save one, you save the toddler. But it seemed to me like he was jumping to the conclusion then that abortion in the first trimester is fine. And to me, it seemed like, well, maybe your intuition tells if you can only save one, you can only save one. But that doesn't mean you go and smash and murder the frozen embryos for any other reason. So anyway, Josh, what's your thoughts on the conversation we had about abortion yesterday?
Yeah, I share a lot of those similar thoughts. I'm going to be a little bit more charitable. I don't think Randal said that Harris only wants abortion in the first trimester. I think he simply said that Harris wants to reinstitute Roe, which made abortion legal in the first trimester and illegal in the second, third trimester, except for some mitigating circumstances and cases. Roe was expanded far beyond that throughout its tenure. There were people that were having late-term abortions. Partial birth abortions have been federally illegal for a long time, but Roe has been expanded. So one of the things I wanted to kind of push back on that is that according to the ACLU, Harris has promised, if elected president, that she would protect and expand reproductive freedom, expand. She wants to not only federalize abortion, but expand the rights, the quote unquote rights that Roe gives. So she has not only said that she only wants abortion in the first trimester. She's not even only said that she would only institute Roe as the federal law of the land. She has said that she wants to expand access to abortion care beyond that, which I don't know what that means, and so I can only go with what her running mate, some of the laws that he's had in his state as governor. I can only go with the fact that she has refused to answer questions concerning third trimester abortions, and has refused to even answer questions about care on botched abortions. She hasn't even answered those questions, whether or not that is something that she would be for or not. And so it seems like, to me, if she wants to expand the care, all I can do is say, well, she chose a running mate whose state has it legal through all 3 trimesters, and also whose state has, according to its own records, allowed at least 3, maybe 5 babies to be born through botched abortions to not receive any care, any life-saving care. No measures were taken. That's according to their own state to save them. And so it seems to me that she's radical on abortion, very radical. And I don't agree with Trump's stance, but like we said, he gives a fighting chance. As for the analogy that he gave, I just say I reject that analogy outright, and the reason I reject it outright is it's just full of holes. You mentioned that it's not like the firefighter's going to smash the embryos, but it's even more full of holes. I mean, the point of it is our intuition says to save the child, and one of the things that I would say is our intuition can often be shaped by cultural framing of a topic. And the cultural framing of this topic has been such that human embryos don't have the same sort of value as a toddler. That, just because my intuition says that, doesn't mean that that's true. It doesn't mean that's ontologically the case. And I think it's very dangerous to make the case that there is ontological value gained through development. Does that mean a 3-month-old that's born has less value than a 5-year-old? They're on different stages of development. Where does the ontological value, where does it culminate? Where does it peak? That is a very dangerous proposition to make when you're talking about human life, that development can somehow equate to value. It's either a human life or it is not. There are different developmental stages. That is, of course, true. I'm not saying that a 6-week-old preborn baby has the same development as far as organs or brain waves, functions like that, as a 2-year-old born child. But to say that their value is based on whether they have had a certain amount of development is absolutely dangerous, and I think untenable.
I'd like to say something there, if it's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that occurs to me when I think about this particular analogy that does come up quite a bit in this discussion is it makes sense to me that the intuitions that I have about that situation. So I agree. Let me go ahead and agree that while on thoughtful reflection, I can make statements about those embryos that I think that those represent persons, and that it would be wrong to kill them or something, or destroy them or let them burn if you could stop it. And I agree that my intuitions toward the baby on the table or whatever are much stronger.
Yeah.
But then I have to ask the question, what explains the intuition that I have? And I think what explains it is, it seems like a design feature that we have, that we are sort of designed to be impulsed, if I can use that as a verb, impulsed toward taking care of what looks like a little baby human being, in the way that people for most of human history recognized seeing another human being, a little baby human being. It makes sense that I would have a design feature that would push me in that direction, because it seems like that would be good for most of human history. That's very important. That's something that the creator would want. I don't know why I would have a design feature throughout most of human history for saving test tubes or their contents. Right. And so I think that explains the intuition but then also explains why at deeper reflection, we should be able to see past that to something deeper.
Right.
That's a thought that I had. And also I've thought, and I don't know what this does to the analogy, so maybe I'll ask you guys, but it seems to me like if you had the baby on the table and on the other side of the room, let's say of a long room, very long room, you had all of the test tubes with the embryos in them. And let's say that those embryos are at various stages. Now, if you take the baby, let's say next to that baby is another baby that is in one of those little plastic, I don't think they're incubators, but little plastic things they place them in right after they're born. They put most babies in those right after they're born for a few seconds to do whatever they got to do to clean the baby up and all that. Well, you got one of those. Maybe next to that, you've got one that has a little more sophisticated of an incubator type situation, and you can kind of see where this is going. You have then now a spectrum of children all the way from the baby we're initially talking about on the table to the test tubes. And I think then it becomes a lot less clear where and it becomes more like what we see pro-life advocates, I think, do a lot, where they will put out a picture of all the stages of development in utero and say, okay, now where is it okay now to terminate? And so I think what that does in my mind, unless I'm missing something, and maybe Randal can explain or you can explain what I'm missing, it seems like that would kind of just neutralize the whole analogy. And really, we're just back to discussing at what stage, right?
Yeah. And also the analogy is just a difference in kind too. The question is, who would you save, not who is worthy of death? Like which one would you kill?
Exactly.
And there's also mitigating circumstances. Even if I were to grant the analogy for sake of argument, like you said, Braxton, the development, but there's also like mitigating circumstances to understand that this is why I'm against IVF, by the way, spoiler alert, but most human embryos that are used for in vitro fertilization, stuff like that, they actually are discarded, which is awful. So you have to choose between a living, already born child and living unborn children that are possibly going to be discarded. You're not sure which ones. You have to choose between that. That makes the choice more difficult. And also, you have to keep the embryos frozen. So you have to understand exactly how to get them out. Are you even guaranteed, if you were to make the choice to save the 100 rather than the one, that you could even keep them frozen or get them to a different facility? As you drill down into it, is that the point of the matter is if this is just a highlight that I have an intuition that could be built in through creative framing, through our creation process, it could be built in. I don't think it shows that our intuition actually proves that there's this ontological difference between babies in test tubes and babies that are already born. And so that's why I reject that analogy. And I find that the pro-life position, what I've told some people is, okay, if we can have an argument about when ensoulment occurs or when a baby becomes a person, but the question is, who has the right to make that declaration? At what point do we have a right to make that declaration? And the safest point is to say, when new life begins, that's a person, because I don't have the power to grant personhood. Only God does. And so the safest position to have is at conception. So I think I beat that horse to death now, but
right. Yeah, that's the safest position, definitely. If it might be a person, you ought to treat it as a person. But we do know by a science that at conception we have humans. It's the first stage of human
DNA. Right. Yep. Completely unique. Never.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, my intuition's also, if there was a toddler in a burning building and a room full of 1,000 puppies, and I can only save one, the set of puppies or the toddler, I'm going to save the toddler. But that does not mean I should go murder puppies. Josh, you said it's a different kind of analogy. It misses the point completely, because it's about who should you save first. It's not about who has a right to get killed or who.
So if the fireman walked into the building and said, "Well, who should I murder? Should I murder the already living child, or should I go smash all those test tubes?" And when you say that about the puppies, there is ontologically different value between the puppies and the baby as well. So
but we still can't just go murder puppies for I mean, yeah, we would save a human before we would save the puppies, but that doesn't give you the right to go kill puppies.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I
Yeah.
mean,
so that's why I think the analogy breaks down. That's why I think the analogy breaks down outright, because it's sure, maybe it's a measure on, well, which one do you value more to save? But it's a false dilemma. The abortion isn't about which one I value more to save. It's not about whether or not I value a 2-year-old more than a preborn 2-month-old. It's not about which one I value more. It's about, do they have value? Do they have value? And which one is it okay to kill? And I say neither.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So with that said, I want to touch really quickly on the Harrison Walls view on abortion. Now, since Kamala has been, she's run, it seems, from answering that question. So like you said, we can infer the best explanation here by looking at her running mate's actual policies in his state, how he is governed with it. And we do know that abortion is the top of the list for Kamala's campaign. It's probably the primary thing she's running on, it seems to me. If it's
it's at least the only position she hasn't changed.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. She's flip-flopped all over the place since she's been the candidate. And so I think we have good reason to be skeptical of everything that's on her website, which is something we'll bring up later. But let's talk about Walz's position on abortion in Minnesota, and also touch on, Randal didn't want to call it infanticide. We would call it infanticide, but something along those lines. Let's discuss Walz's position and why it's a rational inference to then say this is also Kamala's position.
Yeah. So, abortion's been legal basically through trimesters in Minnesota for a really long time. So it's not like Walz changed that. But what he did change was the necessity to provide care and to keep statistics for providing care in the Minnesota Constitution for botched abortions. So they don't even keep statistics anymore. So we can't even find, after 2021, whether or not babies who were living have been allowed to die. And there is kind of a semantic difference here when you say, well, yeah, but that's not actively killing a baby that's born. That's not infanticide. I'd say you were actively in the process of killing the baby, and then the baby was born, and you allow that process to finish by not providing any life-saving care. Yeah. So that is infanticide. Like, sure, there might be a semantic range there to some degree where a baby's not being born completely healthy and then you're killing it. Sure, that's not happening anywhere. I agree. But what is happening is you're trying to kill a baby in the 3rd trimester. It is born, and then you don't provide any care and you let the process of trying to kill that baby take hold and finish. Then I would say, yeah, that is a post-birth abortion in that sense, because you allow the process to finish. So I would call that infanticide. And then some people will say, well, those are like, you're saying there's only 3 cases, only 5 cases. Those are very, very slant. Like, why are you arguing the extremes? And fair enough. But then I need you to not bring the 10-year-old or the incest case or the rape case against my side either. Let's argue abortion on its merits without the extremes. So that's
hey guys, with that thought out there, I would just go ahead and say we have super chats. I guess you guys probably don't mind if I just throw those in when they come.
No, interrupt.
From MJ Jackson, a good friend of the channel who sometimes shows up for the Biblical Rogues Gallery on Monday nights. And thank you for the super chat. He says, does Kamala have the means and capacity from the executive office to carry out an offensive against the pro-life position? Please spell it out for the audience if she does. Thank you.
Well, I'll just quickly say the other side sure thinks that Trump has that power to carry out an offense against the pro-choice side. So yes, I do think so. And Trump actually did use his power to overturn it. And he did it through the appointment of judges at the SCOTUS level and others. And so Kamala will have that same power. Josh, take it away.
Yeah. That was weird. So I get what this is getting at. Yeah, she needs approval through Congress or through the Senate to do that. But here's the thing. Usually throughout a president's term, they will have the Senate at some point. And she has made the overt promise, she will nuke the filibuster, which means you don't need 60 votes in the Senate. You only need 51. She will nuke the filibuster to do the federalization of abortion. She has promised that from her own lips. There are those within her circles that have said within that promise is the promise to also in that bill to make sure all the Democrats vote for it. Within that promise, she's going to introduce Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. as states, even though Washington, D.C. as a state is unconstitutional. They get around that by shrinking D.C. to the size of basically the National Mall. Washington, D.C. as states, and then so giving basically 4 more Senate seats to the Democrat side, and then also putting Supreme Court reform within that same bill. There are people who have said she'll nuke the filibuster, do that. Now, I'm going to ignore those other two and just talk about the promise that she has made from the executive office to say, if I can get 50 senators, that's all she needs, because the vice president is the tie-breaking vote. So she only needs 50 senators because Tim Walz will rubber stamp whatever. So if she gets 50 votes for a national abortion institution into law from the federal level, she will nuke the filibuster and do that. She's already promised to do that. That's not by any means some crazy conspiracy theory that could happen. That the Senate was Democratic not too long ago in Joe Biden's term, so it would be easy to see that that's happening. And the last thing I would say concerning that is, I don't know exactly what she would try to do through executive order, but we have seen her administration and Joe Biden try to do things through executive order that are clearly illegal and end up getting shut down by the Supreme Court. So I have no doubt that she would try to, through the CDC, maybe claiming that it's a national health crisis. I could see her writing an executive order that she would say, okay, sue it and take it to the Supreme Court to say that at least while she's trying to work on the Senate bill, to say she's going to buy time for federal abortions nationwide. So I think that given those factors, there is a greater than average chance that she would be able to do that from the executive office.
Yeah.
Real quick, thank you, Derek, for this. Wait a minute. Trying to do that on the wrong screen. Thank you for that super chat. He's also, I said super chap. He is a super chap. And that super chap is also often on the Biblical Rogues Gallery on Monday nights. So I guess we need to get more people into the Biblical Rogues Gallery, because once you're in there, you apparently give super chats. And so we can just stack everything up that way. Carry on, fellas.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up this abortion segment. I just want to ask you, Josh, is Trump the pro-life candidate in this election?
Is Trump the pro-life?
Yeah.
That's funny. I think Trump is effectively pro-choice, but I think he's the more pro-life candidate. Yeah. So I kind of boil it down this way. Trump is pro-choice, but Kamala's administration is pro-abortion. Those are two completely different issues. Now, and Trump has said he's going to vote against Amendment 4 in Florida, which is kind of a radical pro-abortion bill. He's also said
that up because yesterday it turned into that. I think if memory serves, that Trump was for late-term abortion. I don't know if Randal said that or somebody asked that. I haven't gone back to listen, but
it's interesting because he's been he's been pretty consistent about that this go around, that basically he's okay with it to 12 or 13 weeks. He's basically the first trimester okay with it. If the bill in Florida was that, maybe he would vote for it, but the bill in Florida isn't that, and he's voting against it. But the big thing to me is that while he won't sign a federal ban, and I wish he would, he is not going to override states to be able to fight the topic. And I know the conversation was that, well, this is kind of like pro-lifers voting for somebody that says leave abolition to the states.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and to a certain degree, I totally get that frame of reference, which is why I don't necessarily blame staunch pro-lifers for wanting to withhold their votes from him. I have been, I mean, you know this, Tim, I have railed against Trump's abortion stance. I am in no way someone who has been in favor of it. But I also do think that we have an opportunity to continue to fight the battle. I don't want a civil war to break out over abortion like it broke out over slavery. Although you could argue that abortion is worse than slavery on a national scale because of the amount of lives taken and lost.
The body count.
Yeah, the body count. But I think there's a possibility for the fight, and I think there's a possibility to hopefully in the future drag the Republican Party back to a federal abortion ban if we can prove that it's a winning issue. And that's the big thing. I think if you could prove to Donald Trump that it was a winning issue, if you could prove to him that it was a winning issue, he would jump on board because he wants to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Really quickly, give us your thoughts on the incrementalism view that you've written about.
Yeah. So now there are people who take like a staunch pro-life abolitionist stance, and I am an abolitionist, but because we also have to live in the reality of things as they are, and so it takes a while to convince people of what abortion is, because there's been a lot of propaganda over the last 50 years of what abortion isn't, saying it's like a clump of cells, my body, my choice, that sort of stuff, and we need to continue to fight against that. And so unfortunately, it's necessary to pursue at least some mitigation of the thing before we can outright ban it. And so I think incrementalism, while it's not a position I want to hold, is the most tenable position to make a difference, because if we go for broke, if we just put forward candidates that are going to completely abolish abortion, it's been shown that that doesn't work in federal elections or even in state elections. And then we end up with nothing. We end up with no guardrails, and so
we lose the whole battle because we went for it.
I would rather retain footing and advance, and do what the left did. So the left took a long march, right? And so I think we can bide time, take a long march. I hate it. I don't want to do it that way. If I had a magic wand that I could wave and abortion's illegal in the United States, I would do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me ask you this question. You may not like this question. This came up last night,
and like all sorts
being
of
asked again today. And so I wonder, can you ask both people if they'll accept the results if their side loses?
I accepted the results in 2020, so I would accept the results now.
Yeah, I accepted them too. What I didn't accept was I thought the election, I think we could say there was election interference, not in the actual votes cast or counted, but within the media. I think we could say the media stole the election for Biden with the and they complain about mis and disinformation, but they're the kings of it. They project upon the other side what they're doing all the time, and especially, I mean, with the whole Russia thing, which they used to just attack Trump for 4 years, turned out to be a hoax, and you don't see much apology from their side now. And also the suppression of the information about the Hunter Biden laptop, which probably, given how close the election was, that probably would have turned it for Trump last time. So I think we can say it wasn't a fair election in that sense. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. So I think that's the stance that I take as well. And I also want to point out that the big issue I have with Trump saying that he didn't really lose in 2020 and that sort of thing is he carried it all the way through, and January 6th happened. And I hate January 6th. I don't think it's the end all be all like some people. Like it's a threat to the entire democracy and all that. But when it happened, I thought, this is ugly, this is disgusting, and this should never have happened. I remember telling somebody who claimed that I would have been one that stormed the Capitol to say, I've never even been to a political rally, and I never planned to go to a political rally. So that is not the case. I wouldn't have been there. But there is precedent in history for the losing side, while even conceding, claiming that they didn't actually lose. Hillary Clinton in 2016, Al Gore in 2000, and so on and so forth. So it's not like this has not been something that's happened. It's just that Trump took it to way too far, and I would encourage him not to this time if it happens. And he won't have he won't have similar ability as he did last time since he's not the incumbent.
Now, as you're jumping back into your fact checking of yourselves, and I guess Rauser, I just want to say here, this actually would be maybe a good idea. I'd like to hear this as a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, Flame of the Spirit. Here's a fun idea. How would you both steel man an argument for why Christians can vote for Kamala? So for anyone that doesn't know, a steel man is just making the case the way you think that the opponent would, or even better than they might make it.
Well, since we contend that it's impossible for an informed and consistent Christ follower to use their power to advance the evil of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The only way I could do that is to show how they're not informed, right? And I believe, I don't want to, so Randal gave us a lot of things to consider yesterday. I would, and I think we're doing this today now, is showing that it was misinformation. The way I understand it, tell me if I'm wrong, misinformation is false claims that you think are true. Disinformation is when you give false claims that you know are false. Am I right about that? Is that
I don't even know anymore. I think sure. Let's go with that.
I'm gonna say that Randal has been lied to. He probably only gets his news from a liberal outlet, a leftist outlet, and he gave us a whole bunch of their talking points. I think he believes these things, but I think he's being lied to, and so I don't think he's being deceptive. He's just parroting what he's heard. I know Josh and I are careful to get our news from both sides. I like to put MSNBC, Fox News up and go back and forth between the two, listen to leftist podcasters and conservative podcasters, and to try to make try to come to truth that way. It seems to me that we got a bunch of misinformation yesterday, which is why we're having to have this this interview now. So the best case I can make is one has a bunch of, they've been fed a bunch of misinformation and they believe it. And so they believe they're being consistent. But now we're going to say, well, look, you're still not informed, i.e. you do not have the true information. And so I don't think, I can't steel man an argument for how an informed and consistent follower of Christ would use their power to help advance the evil of Harris and Walz. Josh, maybe you can. What would you say?
Yeah, the only one I can think of, and I think I actually offered this in our conversation with Randal, and I don't think he actually thinks that this is the case. But if one can prove with a certain degree of plausibility, like fairly plausible, that Donald Trump is indeed going to be a fascist dictator that abolishes the Supreme Court, abolishes the Senate and the Congress, and wants to take over, and he's lied about his desire to release power after 4 years. If that is the case, if he's truly that person, I could see, because there's going to be more death that comes from that. There's going to be more death, more difficulty, more hardship to our neighbors that comes from that than there would be that would come from a Kamala presidency, even though she has some similar tendencies. And so to me, I think that would be the strongest argument, and that's kind of the argument that I kind of see some people try to make. Now I like you, I just don't think that there's a high probability of that.
So I think I can steel man it. Obviously, I'm going to disagree with aspects of this, but that's the point of a steel man here. I'm going to give you the best that I can do at what I think makes their case the way they want to make it here. And I think that based on what I heard last night and what I've heard in the community, I think that what one would say is, okay, look, you do have to choose the lesser of two evils. And what we have here now, obviously, there are people that think that it's okay not to vote because they think you don't pick among the lesser of two evils. But I think that someone might say who wants to vote for Kamala and thinks that that they can be consistent and informed as a Christian doing that, they would say, well, look, here's the deal. As we heard last night, there may be good reason to believe. Now, this is me steel manning again. Like, this is not necessarily what I think, but there may be good reason to believe that there is ontological development in utero, such that, yes, at some point that is going to become what we could call a person, but it's not necessarily there, say, prior to consciousness or something, or there's good reason to think it's not there prior to consciousness, or whatever metric they want to use. And so the abortion issue alone can't be the thing that seals the deal, especially given that if we look at what Kamala's stated positions are, in terms of her campaign, what she's stating as her positions in this campaign, then within that ontological development notion and what she's stating, perhaps a Christian can come to a conscious a position in their conscience, being faithful to their conscience, that one can make this decision, particularly when compared to the incredibly great evils that we see in Trump's character and in his stated policies and what those may accomplish. I think that's kind of a steelman of it. Now, obviously, from the moment of conception, I believe that it's wrong to terminate a pregnancy, but I'm just giving you, I think that might be a good steelman of their position.
No, look, I get the argument. Okay, so that, I mean, when I say give me a steelman, I don't see that as a steelman, because that is their argument. That Trump is literally Hitler or close enough. And that is so bad that no matter how bad and evil Kamala Harris is, you just have to vote for her. I get it. But that argument, the reason why I can't go there and I can't steelman it is because Josh and I know the defeaters to that argument. So that's why we included that word informed. I mean, you have to be informed of all the facts. And once one is informed, they see the justification, they see the defeaters, they've considered defeaters to the defeaters, and you just go till you can't go anymore. You see, I mean, Josh and I have been swimming in these waters for years now, and really for the last couple of years, just dialed in on this stuff. That we can't unsee it because we've been swimming in this information, and so.
I think you could, I could steelman the argument and then you can shoot it down, right?
Right.
I think I've presented what I think might be a good.
I think that was Randall's argument,
and then you can, and then you guys can shoot holes in it. For example, I always have appreciated when we talk about this ontological development thing. I've always appreciated the sled argument of Stephen Schwartz that says, look, there are only these 4 differences between in utero versus any other particular person, and that's size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependence. And if we discriminated against if we considered someone not a person based on their size, how does this work? I mean, even Josh mentioned this a while ago, kind of that, well, wait a minute, it's like my daughter is much smaller than me. My daughter is much, much smaller than me. So does that make me more? Are tall people more valuable? No one wants to say that. So size won't do it. Level of development won't do it. Environment, people aren't more valuable based on where they are in the room. Level of development, by the way, I would say wouldn't do it because, like we say, a baby that's born is more developed than a baby in utero, but a 5-year-old is more developed than the baby, and an adult woman is more developed than the 5-year-old little girl. So that won't do it. We don't do that in any other circumstance. And I would say our intuitions mitigate against that. Environment, we don't consider someone to be less valuable or not persons because they're in one environment versus another. And with degree of dependence, this is where the conversation often goes to, someone who's in an assisted living facility or something and is dependent on someone else. And of course, at that point, it usually takes off toward what do you call it when we're talking about a woman having ownership of her own body and autonomy in that sense. But I think those sled arguments kind of do that. So I can shoot it down, but I think that's what they're saying. And I know you guys knew that.
I get it. Yeah. No, I think that was basically Randall's argument yesterday. So Trump is so bad at that his evils trump all the evils of Harrison Walls.
But Randall also kind of admitted that you don't have to vote one way or the other. You could
and then with that being the case,
vote for third party, which would mean to me like that's why I would say if that's the case, to me, the most steelman version of that argument is you have to stop Trump because he's going to take over and steamroll the entire country based on January 6th and other things.
Yeah, and I think we have really good reasons to reject that, and I think we're going to get to that later. But I want to transition to transitioning of confused kids. That is, sexually and physically mutilating the genitals and the bodies of confused kids. We're not just a single issue. We're not single issue voters. I think this is something that's got the attention of Americans and has caused many who would maybe be voting Democrat to not be casting a ballot, a blue ballot this time around. So let's talk about that. Randal seemed to kind of downplay this issue that, I called it, quoting Dr. Robert A.J. Gagnon, the chemical castration of minors. And he said that, it's just puberty blockers. They don't do any damage. They're reversible. And, I said, no, they're not reversible. And he's like, oh, what I've seen they are. Well, Josh, help us out.
Yeah. So I heard him say that. And
you had left at this point.
I had left, and I was kind of listening on my way home to celebrate my daughter's birthday. Her birthday's on Halloween. Yes, it is. And so here's the thing. There was recently an article that was released, and I'm trying to find it here. I did post it. I did post it in the chat. But there was an article released, you can Google it, that a doctor actually withheld a peer-reviewed study that showed that there are harmful effects to puberty blockers to kids, mentally harmful effects to puberty blockers to kids. So she withheld that study because it could be used against the treatment of what we call transgender youth. So there's a few things here. One, if you read Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, you find out that according to statistics, children who experience gender dysphoria grow out of it by the age of 18 at the rate of between 80 and 90%. Mm-hmm. If they're not given any medical intervention, okay, if they're not given puberty blockers, if they're not given any sort of social transition, if they're just left alone, they will grow out of it by the time they're 18 and have a healthy life.
Yeah.
Second of all, studies have shown that there are harmful side effects to giving cross-sex hormone treatments. In fact, osteoporosis, which is usually elderly people deal with, will set in with cross-sex hormones after a period of time for youth, for teenagers. And so we're not just talking about 4 and 5-year-olds here. We're talking about 14, 15, 16-year-olds. There's a case in Canada where my chair shrunk. There's a case in Canada where a father got his rights taken away from his child because he refused to go along with the transition. And so Lupron is one of the medications that's used. That's also used to chemically castrate sex offenders. So if that's used to chemically castrate sex offenders, then why are we giving it to little kids? Why are we giving it to kids to avoid puberty? Now, there are puberty blockers that are used to treat precocious puberty, and precocious puberty usually comes around the age 4 or 5 where kids are starting to have puberty develop. But that's only given for a short period of time and very, very rigidly to defeat precocious puberty. And in some cases, there can be sterilization that still occurs after that. So this idea that puberty blockers are somehow this safe thing that just delay puberty, put a pause button on puberty, is increasingly shown not to be the case. In fact, Europe, England, all those countries have stopped this practice. They've stopped doing it because it's so dangerous. It's mutilating kids. There was a story of a young child, probably about 6 or 7. I can't remember. It's just off the top of my head. Recently, that's gone viral. He was a boy. I think it was a boy that wanted to be a girl, and his parents gave him puberty blockers around the age 6 or 7, and just come out about 5 years after that story ran, I think in National Geographic or Time Magazine or something, that he's fine. He wants to be a boy now, but because they started him on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, he will be sterile for the rest of his life.
Right. Yeah.
And won't be able to experience any sort of sexual activity. So this is why this is such an important thing. Kids can't consent. And so when you and parents should not force their kids to consent for cultural plaudits. And so it is child abuse. And then Tim Walz has a law in Minnesota that makes Minnesota a what they call trans refuge state, where if a teenager comes to Minnesota and says, hey, I think if it's a teenage girl that wants to be a boy or vice versa, says, hey, I want to be a boy, but my parents don't agree, they will actually step in and take custody of that child if that's the case, because they think that that's the best for the child. So those things are happening. There's a story of a man in Washington State, I think from 3 years ago, whose kid was being socially transitioned without his awareness at school. He found out, they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, we will call Child Protective Services if you don't play into this social transition, and we won't release him from the hospital until you agree. He released from the hospital because he agreed, and then overnight he picked up his family and moved to Texas. And come to find out a few years later, his kid was just autistic and he's living as the sex he was born with. So these are real things. These are real things that are happening. And these are real positions that the Harrison Walz campaign have. It's not on their website, but it doesn't need to be. She announced her campaign on RuPaul's Drag Race. Right. She has constantly been with trans creators, trans social media influencers that are meant to influence kids. That's what social media influencers are meant to do. So she has propped all of this up, and to say, well, it's just not on her. She doesn't have that on her positions. Well, first of all, she didn't have positions for like the first 30 days that she ran.
Right.
And second of all, she wouldn't put that on her positions because it is too damning for her. So
that's what I told Randal yesterday. He kept saying, well, on her website. I'm like, she's not going to put that on her website.
Sorry, I talked really long in answer to that question. I am kind of passionate about that, but hopefully.
Well, and before you say more about it, maybe you have more to say about that. I just wanted to. I've made this guy wait a little bit, but one, thank you. He says, it seemed to me that during the debate there was concession given to those who choose not to vote for either Trump or Harris. Why then continue to go hard against those who follow their conscience? I can kind of answer that real quick for Tim, and that is that the subject of this debate was based around whether an informed and consistent Christian can vote for Kamala Harris. But Tim actually has argued elsewhere that he thinks it may be a sin for such a person to refrain to vote. And so, Tim, you may want to speak more to that.
Yeah, well, just when it comes to when it comes to loving our neighbors, I mean, so what Josh and I do is we go through and we expose just how evil the modern day Democrat machine has become, led by Harrison Walz. And so we expose these evils, we show how great they are. And then when you consider Jesus's words to the Pharisees, I mentioned this yesterday, when he says, woe to you, you hypocrites and blind guides, you strain out a gnat and swallow a camel because you ignore the greater matters of the law. And Jesus just excoriates these religious folks. And so given that the greatest command, I mean, Galatians 5:14 makes it clear, and Paul writes it also in Romans, and Jesus talks about the greatest commands. But Paul is clear that the entire law of Christ, everything that Jesus said, taught, and exemplified is summed up in one command, and that's love your neighbors. So as I went through yesterday and showed what love does, love suppresses evil, love defends the oppressed, love protects their neighbors, right? And so when you see this great evil that's coming against your neighbor, a good neighbor doesn't just say, well, I'm not going to deal with it. No, the good neighbor fights evil and opposes it and protects their neighbor. And so, I get called a sheepdog quite a bit because I'm so focused on loving my neighbors, protecting my neighbors, loving my wife. I'm going to protect my wife no matter what. And I'm going to protect my son. no matter what. And I'm going to treat everybody like that. I'm going to protect them from evil. So once one has become informed, and that was one of the scriptures I talked about yesterday. If somebody, once one has become informed of evil and they don't speak out against it and oppose it, then they're in sin. And so, yeah, I do think a case can be made. Yeah, both, I think the character of both Trump and Kamala Harris, both of them, low quality, right? We could go back and forth. They both have a horrible past of, horrible sexual past. You might say Trump's is worse. I don't know. They're both really bad. They're just, look, both bad character. However, the policies of Harris and Walz bring literal death and destruction. As we've been talking about today, it brings literal death and destruction upon your neighbors. The policies of Trump and Vance seek to oppose all of those, right? Now the one, we made the caveat that we wish that the Trump pro-life stance was stronger, but it's still a pro-life stance. And it allows us to continue having these conversations, continue trying to make changes for the better. So there is a pro-life position here, but there's so much more than the pro-life position. We've got the transing of the kids. We're going to get into Marxism soon. There's so many issues that hiding these things from parents, this transitioning of kids from parents, really violating their rights. So yeah, I do think a case can be made, but as Braxton said, the case yesterday that we were supposed to be debating was, can an informed and consistent Christ follower vote for Harris and Walz? And so that's why I didn't get it. If you want to see me debate Pritchett on this, I think we did that like on Friday.
And that one gets more heated than the Rauser debate. Actually,
it really does.
Yeah.
If you like the red meat, go listen to these two conservatives argue about whether you can not vote and not be in sin.
So there is kind of a caveat to that too, Tim, where we have talked about effective votes as well.
Yes.
So there are places like California, Washington, deep red states and stuff like that. To us there could be definitely some wiggle room as far as what your convictions are.
In the interest of fact checking here, Brian Stevens says she didn't announce on RuPaul. That happened 5 days later.
So sorry. Oh my goodness.
I guess everything
I was wrong. I 100% agree that I was wrong. She didn't officially announce.
I think your point was just that. Your point just that she affiliates commonly with influencers and now television personalities?
One of the first places she went to announce her candidacy was to RuPaul's Drag Race. That's 5 days after her official announcement.
Yeah.
And 5 days after that, well, I don't even know what's her official announcement, I guess. Was it at the DNC? Is that the official announcement when they kind of
no primary, so
when they kind of kicked the old man to the curb and said, actually it's you.
What a great democratic process
I guess that's when she announced. Was that July 21st? Was that the DNC?
I can't remember.
Democrat National. I can't remember. Is that officially when she announced? I can't remember. But okay.
Close
so
enough.
One of the first places she went was that place. That was my point. Yeah.
Well, I've talked about this before on our channel, Free Thinking Ministries. Make sure you go there and like and subscribe too. But on our show, I think once when we were talking, Josh, I talked about how when I was a little kid, 3, 4, 5 years old, maybe even, I went through a phase and I wanted to be Wonder Woman.
I remember this story.
Yeah.
It almost made me stop working with you.
Right. I get it.
This suddenly got a whole lot more interesting.
I love the Braxton pop in right there.
That's right. Here it comes again.
That's great.
So, and even at school, I'd tell my, we go out into the playground and we're like, who I'm Superman, I'm Spider-Man, and I'm like, I'm Wonder Woman, so I can, now things like that. If there was a teacher back then who would have been like, oh, Timmy, you're Wonder Woman? Like, okay, well, now what if that's going on? I think in California, teachers can't tell their parents. And I believe that's the case in Minnesota too. Tim Walz' state. So I think teachers are in a position to keep it from parents, to start the transitioning process. And, which I would call indoctrination, and then telling them, hey, you can continue to live like this here. You don't have to tell your parents. And ultimately, once they're on that path, it's really hard to change them. And then even if they're not in Minnesota, ultimately they can make that trip to Minnesota. I think you made that case. Mm-hmm. And they can get surgically transed against the parents' wishes. Yeah. Am I wrong?
I don't know. I don't know. Like I think they can get like hormone replacement. I don't know if they can get surgery. So I'd have to check that.
I could be wrong on that.
But they get affirmed, and then I think they can be prescribed like puberty blockers and cross-section
in Minnesota without parents' wishes. Right. Yes, even opposed to parents' wishes.
Yes, I believe that's the case.
All right. So that's a violation of parental rights.
Yeah, because now here's the thing. Like if I were to steel man that position, I would say, hey, if trans ideology is correct and you can become the opposite sex, and if you don't become the opposite sex, then you will die. And so you must do it. I could see why you'd be like, oh, it's abuse to not let a kid do that because you're keeping life-saving care. The problem is that none of that is true. Like all of that is false. And it's been documented. So then it becomes child abuse to do it the other way.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say about the trans issue?
I'm sure there are things I would like to say, but we can move on.
Yeah. We're
off the top of my head.
We're an hour in. We've probably got another 5 hours left, but we won't do that. There, we could go for probably another hour. There was so much to respond to. Even Dr. Rauser jokingly admitted, "Yeah, I'm kind of gish galloping here," and that is when you're having a debate. And
I think he was trying to say he's building a case, but it could feel like a gish gallop. I think that's
right. And I don't hold that against him by any means. I guess he could probably say the same for me. It's like I just blasted a whole PowerPoint slide up there with this long list of evils, and I didn't even go through all of them. So hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But that's why we have to have these further conversations. I want to talk about Marxism now because, Josh, you and I have discussed this in our writings, and both our article called "A Moral Obligation to Vote for an Immoral Candidate." We encourage people to go to freethinkingministries.com and read that. We wrote that in April prior to Biden dropping out. And then we wrote just recently, a couple of weeks ago now, or maybe a little bit more, one called "An Open Letter to Our Never Trump Friends." You can read that in 3 different parts because that's a 10,000 word letter full of footnotes. You can read it in 3 different parts on Josh's page. If you want to read the whole PDF, that's on my page, both found at the same website. But we both talk about Marxism quite a bit in those articles. The dangers of Marxism. I've got another article I wrote not too long ago called "Key Tenets of Marxism versus America's Philosophical Foundations." So at first I felt like I got 2 different messages from Randal. It seemed to me out of one side of his mouth, he was saying that Harris wasn't a Marxist. And on the other side of his mouth, he was saying Marxism isn't that bad. Or that the things I was saying were Marxism wasn't Marxism. So I don't know what can you connect the dots and show the ties between the Democrat, the modern day Democrat machine, namely Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and their ties to Marxism, and then maybe discuss why that is such a danger.
Yeah. So I think in our previous thing with a moral obligation to vote for an immoral candidate, I made the case that like critical theory and critical race theory are based in Marxism. There's not a debate that is the case. They aren't Marxism in and of themselves, but they are based in the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School was called the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. And so that's where we get critical theory. That's where we get critical race theory, critical pedagogy. We get all of those things. So they all have a connection to Marxism. Marxism wants to, Marx was, it was a philosophical, philosophical prognostication to say, hey, it's a materialist dialectic that the class system is only held by the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Eventually, it's going to uprise and overthrow them, and there will be a classless society, and we'll share all things because that's the just thing. That's the just thing. That didn't happen. So that didn't happen in the early 1900s. They thought that was going to happen. It didn't happen. It failed. So then the Frankfurt School kind of started to kind of rescue the process of, okay, there are things that Marx didn't know about, such as the intersectionality of different races and how oppression plays a role in that, not just economics. And so then there's branches of critical theory that all come out from there. So when we talk about critical theory being based in Marxism, that's what we're talking about. We're not saying that critical theory is a materialistic dialectic just like Marxism. It's a branch out of Marxism from the Frankfurt School that is based on Marxism, which did invert what we would call the Hegelian dialectic. And so all of that to say that all of this does have trappings in Marxism. So when we talk about equity, we don't say that the word equity is Marxist because you say it. It's because of the way we define it. To say, like when Kamala says, well, equity, we want equality, but we have to recognize that not everybody starts at the right place, but we want everybody to end at the right place. Well, what does that sound like? It sounds like elimination of class. It sounds like the ability to make sure not just the playing field is equal, but the finish line is completely laid bare and equal. So everyone's going to finish with the exact same thing. That is based in roots of Marxism. And the Joe Biden policy has had that in it. But the reason I find Kamala Harris a little bit more troubling is because there are more links. So like her father, Donald Harris, was a professor at Stanford University, and he wrote a book called Capital Accumulation and Income Distribution. And his book was based on the theories of David Ricardo, Michael Kalecki, and Karl Marx. And Ricardo's theory on labor is one that Marx embraced, and Marx's theory of the uprising of the common folk is something that Kalecki kind of broadened in his theory. So she's been around it her whole life. And so when she proposes things like price controls, that happened at the beginning of the Soviet Union, the middle of the Soviet Union, and the end of the Soviet Union. And when she proposes things like taxes on unrealized capital gains, even if that would never take hold, what is that designed to do? Even Mark Cuban says that would destroy the economy and destroy the stock market and destroy private industry. Well,
and he continues to support her by saying, "Well, she'll never do that."
Well, she won't do it. She won't do it. It won't happen. But even the thought that could happen, it's either ignorance to what would be the case if it does go through, or it is purposeful in moving a private economy to a public sector economy. So that sort of policy proposals, the price controls and price gouging, what she's saying is, well, inflation's got out of control. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure you can't charge more for anything, even if the cost of the dollar lessens, or even if the worth of the dollar lessens. Well, when you do that and inflation continues to rise, but you can't sell bread now $2 for $2 instead of $1.50, what happens is you're driving private companies out of business, and the government has to take over and distributing those sorts of things. Everywhere price controls, rent controls, everywhere those things have been tried, they have failed miserably because it's actually not capitalistic.
Let me ask you really quick, because I brought up the price controls yesterday after Randal was saying, "Oh, she's not a Marxist, she's a capitalist." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I'm like, well, look at these. She implemented, she's proposed price controls, and he goes, "That's not Marxist." And I said, "Yes, it is." And he goes, "No, it's not." And I said, "Well, it was done by the Soviet Union." And he goes, "Well, I lived in England and we had price controls." How would you respond to that?
Well, it is true that over history there have been price control proposals that have happened in democratic and non-communist countries. The thing is that they've always failed, and they've always been released. Why? Because it drives down competition. it drives up cost of production, and it drives people out of the ability to produce. So that does happen on occasion. I think it happened in the 70s in the United States, but almost always it has been drawn back because it's seen as a detriment to the economics as a whole, because it drives competition away and drives production into the government's hands. You got to take care of your people. So what are you going to do? Those price controls. Now, there have been price controls for price gouging as far as like natural disasters and things like that. Those are kind of different. They're not different completely, but they're kind of different, because what happens is, hey, there's a natural disaster, a grocery store gets blown to smithereens, and so then somebody all of a sudden hikes up the price of their goods so people can go out to buy. So there have been like mitigations to temporary price fluctuations. That's not what she's proposing. She's proposing to fight inflation with price controls, which is a difference in kind of price controls. So, and if it was just the price control thing, that wouldn't necessarily be the issue, but it's the fact that she has links philosophically to her father. She has links to the fact that she's actually saying a phrase where we're not going back, we're going forward. That was actually the Communist Party of USA's tagline in 2020 and 2021. And so she's saying that consistently over and over. The fact that she says, unburden, looking to the future, unburdened by the looking to the future, unburdened by what has been, or looking forward, unburdened by what has been.
Right.
That is, and I actually quote Eric Weinstein and part of the Communist Manifesto in our article that indicates that that is a common talking point and a common theory of Marxian thought, that we want to think of what could be unburdened by what has been. Is the rise of the people who can take apart the system, unburdened by the system itself. So I could unpack even more, but that's why I say
you do in your article.
Yeah. And that's why I say in the article, it's either accidental. So I'm not saying she's necessarily doing it on purpose, or it's active. Or it's active. It's accidental or it's active. And either way, it's bad. Either way, they're bad policies.
Now, Trump's critics are so focused on his rhetoric, but they give all of Kamala's rhetoric a pass. If you're going to focus on Trump's rhetoric and say, oh, that's fascism, then you better scrutinize Harris's rhetoric and say that's Marxism. And look, we can be both Antifa and Anti-Ma. You know, I'm anti-fascism and anti-Marxism. And they're both evil, but Marxism has killed far more people in the world than fascism ever has. So to be consistent, we need to oppose Marxism. It necessarily, I mean, just the way it's structured, Marxism will eventually lead to dictatorship. And so, so to complain or to be scared of Trump wanting to be a dictator, where we had 4 years where he seemed to give us more freedom. We seem to be quite free and in those 4 years, and we're going to talk about that probably next. But I think there's a real clear and present danger with Kamala's policies. I think she has ties to Marxism. I think Waltz does as well. He's pretty much a fan
he
of
said
China.
one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
Right, exactly.
And I'd say taking from someone, like the government taking from you to give to someone else, isn't neighborliness.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You can do it yourself if you want, if you're led to do it. But yeah.
Thank you again, Flame of the Spirit, $10. If true Christ followers can't vote for Kamala because it would be supporting evil, can true Christ followers support companies like Apple and Nike who rely on unethical methods for production?
Well, I don't have an iPhone or any Apple products, and I don't wear Nike, so I'm good.
I'm communicating with you on an Apple computer. I've got an iPhone. So I don't mind if you tell me that I'm in sin right now. I really don't mind. But go ahead, answer the question for me.
Yeah, well, and I'm using a Mac right now, and I hate it. I hate the fact that I have to support a company like this so that I can do a ministry like this, and so that I can have an influence. Um, so I think there's a point. I mean, it's like, oh, look, all the grocery stores around you are owned by evil people. So now what? You're going to starve to death? Or you're going to let your family starve? Now, sometimes you just have to do the best with what you got. But here we've got great evil with bad character versus running against somebody with bad character with really good policies for the most part. So we got horrible character with horrible policies going against bad character with pretty dang good policies. And so to love our neighbor, we have I think the choice is easy, especially considering the words of Christ when he was scolding the Pharisees. What would you add, Josh?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. And I also think part of participating in that system is a little bit different than choosing a candidate to lead a country policy-wise. But it's also to note that it's not just because you support Kamala Harris and she has evil policies. There are evil policies that Trump has that I don't like. It's just that there's an ability to more restrain evil, I think, with Trump's policies than there is with Harris's policies. And so when we move to the private sector, perhaps there is an ability to restrain evil by avoiding certain products if you know the means by which they are using those, but it's not quite the same thing.
I just have to respond to the comment here. Said I could always go to Microsoft. I mean, Bill Gates still owns. Does Bill Gates own Microsoft? Well, I think he's evil. So what are you going to do? I don't really gain anything there.
Now, is this a meaningful symmetry breaker for this? I actually do avoid unethical companies, but this is also a false equivalency because Apple isn't running the country.
Yeah, that's right.
At least as far as we know, Apple isn't running the country.
Yeah, right.
So,
okay, so do we feel like we've made the ties to Marxism? Any other fears?
Well, I'm sure you could. You know what? You can actually go to like Phil Baer's YouTube. We've had a lot of discussions on Marxism with him.
Yeah,
so
we have.
Go to his YouTube and get those discussions.
Phil Baer wrote a great book called Marx Attacks. Instead of Mars Attacks, it's Marx Attacks. And you can find that on Amazon. Highly recommend it. He's authored some articles on the Free Thinking Ministries website, and start there. That's free. But yeah, we've got a lot about Marxism on our website, freethinkingministries.com. And just encourage. I mean, Josh, you went into depth and detail connecting these Marxist dots with Harrison Walls in our open letter. So I do encourage people to go there, read our article that we co-authored together, read Phil Baer's stuff, and just really look into this. I think Marxism is a huge threat, and that's one reason why that's why I'm so vocal against it. All right, well, let's transition to something you noted a little bit ago, Josh. We can compare and contrast 4 years of leadership of Donald Trump to 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, in which they both claim to be basically speaking in one voice. There's this fear that, but Trump's a fascist. Well, maybe we might have had reason to believe that in 2015, but given how he governed, given that his policies seemed to be pretty dang good, and that we were flourishing as Americans. My wife and I were making more money then than definitely than we are now and ever had before. And we seem to have world peace, peace in the Middle East, no new wars. Trump seemed to do whatever he could to avoid wars, even going as far as to make friends with the leaders of those who we would typically see as our adversaries, so that he could negotiate with them. And it seemed to work quite well. All right, so we have 4 years of that where he seemed to be anything but Hitler. And then we can compare and contrast that with the last 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, which arguably has gotten us closer to World War III than we've ever been before. So yeah, compare and contrast these administrations for us.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't want to defend some of the words that Trump has said and his rhetoric and stuff like that. Yeah, I agree. He says ugly things a lot, and he's always said ugly things. He's a brash New Yorker that says ugly things. But I do take a look at his policies and his actions. Limiting of federal government power is something that he did, which is not fascistic. Elon Musk is probably the world's foremost free speech advocate, and he's partnering with Donald Trump. And so I don't think a fascist dictatorship can't thrive if free speech is guaranteed. That doesn't happen. And to say that Trump is like Hitler when he has Jewish family and has gone to like the graves of Jewish rabbis and has gone to Israel, moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, so he's one of the most pro-Israel presidents of our lifetime, whether you like it, whether you like Israel or not. It's the case. But I think what people say is not necessarily his anti-Semitism, but his rhetoric and the fact that, in fact, I saw somebody say that he's fascistic because he wants to shut down the Federal Department of Education, which I find kind of just funny because now I know that the Federal Department of Education doesn't actually say what you can and cannot teach, but it could. You could leverage it to do that if you wanted to. And the fact that he says he's going to abolish any federal control over education, to me, is a point in the non-fascist category for Trump. So while there have been things that he said that are ugly and gross, I look at the things that he's done that have been good and have been the opposite of fascist. And people will point to his immigration policy, conflating illegal immigration with immigrants. He has said he wants more immigrants in the country that are legal immigrants. We need to shout out to Michael Kunkel. He was on Jubilee with Destiny, and Destiny even said we have to fix our asylum rules for this country. We can't just have people coming in and claiming asylum and then getting temporary protected status and thrown into a small city of 60,000 people and expect no problems. Like, we have to figure that out. And the Harris administration, on the other hand, has actually broadened the meaning for asylum. It used to mean you used to have to declare asylum and then say, here are the exact reasons why. Now you declare asylum, and it's basically, if it seems reasonable, we'll give you a slip and a court date, and you can show up or not. And so that's the sort of stuff that Trump does talk over the top, and I hate that. And I wish he would be like, I wish he would take lessons from Vance on how to actually talk.
Vance is such a great communicator.
But that does not mean he's fascistic. It just means he's brash and he overstates things, and he always does that. You can tell his position of deal making has always been to start with the most difficult position possible and then move. So when he says stuff like, "I'm going to impose 1,000% tariffs on this if you build this thing here," and people go, "Oh, that's going to ruin the economy," it's not because he thinks that he's actually going to do it. He says, if you think I'm going to do it, you're going to come to the table and say, "Oh, please don't do that." And you might not build that there. You might end up, you know what, I guess I'll build it in Texas anyway. If that's the case, I'll get more what I want. Now, do I like that tactic necessarily? Probably not, but I probably wouldn't be a good politician or a businessman. So I don't know if that answers the question. But to me, you take a look. Oh, and one thing I was going to say is, now, I get the economic argument. I don't tend to make that when we talk about Trump's fascism, because it's true that you could be fascistic and have a decent economy. It's not necessarily mutually exclusive, right? And so I want to look at his other things. And people will talk about Republicans wanting to ban books, and all of that's not true. You want to ban pornography from children's libraries and public schools. That's it.
Well, you're a Nazi.
So, like, I don't want to ban books, but I do want kids to not be able to read pornographic, gender-based materials. There's some of them, I can't even say them on YouTube. I don't want to get Braxton banned. So you can look up. I think there's a documentary called 22 Words. You have to look that up. I can't remember what the man's name is. He's a pastor, but he actually catalogs that very well. So I don't know if that helps, if that clears anything up, or if I just muddied the waters more.
Yeah. I think ultimately, when it comes to this election, I mean, Trump increased his votes from 2016 to 2020. Now, still lost, but it seems like he's even going to get more votes this time around. We don't know if that's going to lead to a victory or not. But Trump is gaining in popularity, so much so that he's actually, last I saw, was at least threatening to potentially win the popular vote. Well, that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. But he's at least threatening to do so right now. And why is that? It's because most Americans are old enough to remember what our lives were like under his presidency. Now, of course, we're smart enough to bracket the COVID era, right? And say, okay, that was a blip. But prior to COVID, man, things were booming here. Like I said, that was the best that our ministry had ever functioned. People were they were making more money and able to support us with more money. My wife, man, she was my sugar mama for a while because she was selling so many houses as a realtor. Things are different now, and things are much tighter. I love to eat healthy. I still try, but it's not as easy now. I eat fast food much more now. I've gained a little weight. Right? I still try to do my best, but it's harder now because I don't have the same amount of money to spend on healthy food. We know when we go to the grocery store, things are so much more expensive. So yesterday, Randal said, "Hey, you guys are doing really well in America. You're doing great." And I was like, I felt like I was being gaslit because I know that things are much tighter now. And I know a lot of my neighbors have it much worse than I do. So, yeah, what would you say to somebody like Randal who says, "Hey, you guys are doing great"? Yeah, give us your thoughts there, Josh.
Yeah, well, I would say, yeah, if we want to just compare to other countries, that might be the case that we're doing better than Canada. That just means we have a more robust economy than Canada. We also, the dollar is the international currency. If that ever changes, our economy is going to take a huge hit. So yeah, we might be doing better, but better relative to other countries is not better relative to other policies, and that's kind of different. When you have inflation the way that it was and the way that it is, and it has been proven to be because of government spending. People say it's not, but it is because of government spending. There are economists that have said so. Trying to look it up really quickly if I can find it. There are economists that have said that public spending is the primary reason for inflation. Too much money chasing too few goods, and we pump money into the economy. And by the way, if student loan forgiveness had occurred, that would have increased inflation as well. I mean, it's pretty much been proven. So, yeah, relative to other countries, sure. Relative to other policies, I disagree. Other policies could have made this much quicker recovery.
Well, let me do some rapid fire with you here, because we're close to an hour and a half in. What would you say? I think, if memory serves, Randal yesterday said that Trump has a contempt for democracy. I think we touched on that a little bit, but touch on that again.
Yeah, his contempt for democracy. No, see, I think Trump, he has said that he wants every legal vote counted. He's very suspicious of the system. He's very suspicious of it. If he had a contempt for democracy, I don't think he would actually be running for president personally, or because I don't think he would think he could actually win. I think he thinks he could actually win because he thinks that we can actually curb what he thinks was widespread voter fraud and things of that nature. So I don't think he has a contempt for democracy. I know January 6th made it look like that, and rightfully so, it looked like that. I'm not defending his actions leading up to or on January 6th. I think he made almost all the wrong calls leading up to that, and listened to some really poor legal theories. The alternate slate of electors, basically, he had a lawyer that said, hey, in 1867 they did this and it worked, maybe we can do it in 2020, without recognizing that the full context was that there was a compromise reached in 1867 because of that, but it was not supposed to be a process that we would use to challenge election results. So I get the feeling that he has a contempt for democracy, and that and he does praise world leaders like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin and things like that. But he also called Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man, and he told Vladimir Putin, if you invade Ukraine, I'll bomb you. I'll bomb the heck out of you. And Vladimir Putin, according to Trump, said, no, you won't. And Trump said, well, I might. You just don't know. I could. So I think Trump thinks I need to have good relationships with people. And but by the way, for him, good relationships does not mean best friends.
That's right. Doesn't mean the love letters.
Yeah.
Randal was saying that he was writing love letters to Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. It means you either trust me to do what I say, or you have no idea what I'm going to do, and you respect me. That's what he wants. He just wants them to respect him. Now, I would agree that Trump tends to respond to flattery from people in the United States. So that's something I've criticized him for, like his inclusion of RFK Jr. and his platform of RFK Jr. I don't like, because all of a sudden RFK Jr. is flattering him, and he's like, oh, isn't this a great guy? I love this guy. Where he would say the exact opposite if he was making fun of him. But I don't think Trump uses actually that same tactic with international leaders, because he is America first. And so I think what he does is he says, hey, you're really intelligent. I'm going to deal with you. By the way, that's not saying you're going to be my friend. That's saying I respect you as an interlocutor, right? Like as somebody that I'm going to negotiate with. I believe in your intelligence, so I'm not going to bullcrap you. Like I'm going to shoot straight with you, and you can either take it or leave it. And that brings clarity. And I think that's what happened. There were clarity with some of our enemies and confusion with some of the people that he wanted to confuse. So he wanted to confuse Vladimir Putin. He confused him. He wanted to be clear with Xi. He was very clear with Xi. He wanted to be clear with Israel, or an ally, very clear with Israel. And because of that, very clear with the surrounding Arab nations for the Abraham Accords. So I don't see how his international policy was in any way, shape, or form dangerous for the United States. No new wars were started. We were bringing troops home, and
we had peace in the Middle East.
We had peace in the Middle East, or at least as much as there can be in the Middle East. There was peace there, and movement towards relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which probably would have been verified. And the Hamas attack on October 7th probably doesn't happen, because Iran wouldn't have any funds.
That's right.
The Biden administration gave Iran billions of dollars. Released the embargo of Iran so that they could sell billions and billions of dollars of oil, and they fund Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. And all of a sudden the Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis are very active. Go figure, right? If you're upset what's going on in the Middle East, we should be upset with the United States, because we're literally funding both sides of the war. We're literally funding both.
And Biden and Harris have been the top funders of that. I mean, the great meme after, or when Iran was shooting missiles over to Israel recently, and you saw Israel's Iron Dome go off and start protecting it, says our tax dollars, and then it shows the missiles coming from Iran, and it says also somehow our tax dollars, and that shouldn't be the case.
No.
Okay, let's keep this rapid fire thing going. What about the claim that Trump said, "Hey, go find me 11,000 votes so that I can win"?
Yeah. I mean, you can read that the most uncharitable way possible if you'd like, and that would be, hey, go make up 11,000 votes. But remember, Trump is like, no, the votes are there. I know I won Georgia. That's what he's saying. He's saying recount. Basically, he's demanding a recount. Al Gore in Florida demanded a recount. It's just Trump says things, right, that just sound foolish. And so I tend to think he wasn't saying go find votes, like make them up. He was saying count them again, because I guarantee you there's 11,000 more votes there. And then he ended up losing Georgia by more than 11,000 votes anyway. So.
What's Micah saying? You should vote for Kamala, because I have the timestamp. If Kamala wins this election, the Republicans will win the next 20 years of elections. All right. I'm glad you got the time stone, Micah. How'd you get that thing? Man, he's Dr. Strange.
You're muted, Braxton.
Can't hear you.
I think someone also, while we're talking Marvel and stuff, I think someone found a picture of you dressed as Wonder Woman in a men's outfit.
Oh no!
That's not you. That's not you. We'll get you. Hold on. I think I do have you. I don't know.
Why did I bring this up? Why did I bring that up? I am in trouble.
Oh, here we go. No, hold on. I'll bring it up in a second. You'll see.
Man, I'm gonna go viral for all the wrong reasons here. Okay. All right. So, what about this one? Trump's a racist. Just look at his racist past.
Yeah. So I think I touched on that a little bit with Randal, where the Central Park Five, he took out a full-page ad, thought they should be given the death penalty. He still thinks they're guilty because Trump just thinks they're guilty. The full-page ad doesn't say anything about their race. Trump has never alluded to their race. It's just because they're black that people assume that he's being racist because he thinks they deserve the death penalty. Which, what's funny is if a woman was gang raped like that in Central Park by men, I would agree, death penalty. Yeah. Right. And so
no matter what race they are.
Yeah. No matter what race they are. So there's that. There's the Trump apartment complex, which we touched on. But there's also this idea that if he's this dirty, nasty, filthy racist, like Oprah loves him or loved him, and what's her name from The View, Whoopi Goldberg loves him. He's hung out with all of the celebrities, all of the African American celebrities, and was always lauded and loved and seen as. Now that, to me, that's kind of a point against him, because if he's hanging out with Diddy, that's a problem, right? So, and maybe he was or he wasn't, I don't know. And given his sexual past, it wouldn't be a surprise if something like that were to pop up, but I haven't seen it. But here's the thing: I don't find credible these accusations of racism because I just haven't seen it in his policies. Or in who he associates. I mean, he appointed Ben Carson to be in his cabinet, right? He was seriously considering Tim Scott as his VP. And so
I thought that's who was going to be picked at one point. So
I did too. And so I just don't see those allegations as credible. I know that his rhetoric on the Haitian migrants was ridiculous and awful. Vance was reporting what they had heard. Whether or not that's true, it seems like it wasn't true. People were just upset and seeing something and then reporting it as the thing that they saw being actually the case, and they kind of ran with it. But all of those mistakes or all of those inappropriate verbiages doesn't allude to the fact that he is racist. And then I would finally say this, I would conclude with this. He is a white cis male. And so in our society, that means he's automatically racist anyway. So, it's either he's racist in the classical definition, which I don't think is the case, or he's just racist, just like you and I are racist by dint of our skin color, according to Richard Delgado.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
We should have just ended the stream after that popped up.
At least it is a men's Wonder Woman outfit.
At least. Okay.
Did you guys get to the end of what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, my mind is blown. My brain is fried after that. So
yeah. Let's have a little more. All right, guys. Well, this has been a blast. So wrap up.
I got more.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think we've. I don't know. It's been a while.
I'm fine with continuing as long as you guys want. I thought you were wrapping up.
Well,
do you have any more?
I mean, I've got a lot more here that I could go through. There was just so much said, and each point needed to be addressed in depth and detail.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on the claim that Marxism is found in Scripture through that parable.
Oh yes. Thank you.
Yeah, so I fundamentally disagree with the idea that Marxism can be found in Scripture, because Marx and Engels would turn over in their graves if they even heard that phrase. They hated Christianity, and so
they realized it was incompatible.
Yes, they realized it was incompatible, and so I think the parable, first of all, it wasn't government based. It was a private owner hiring individuals and giving them the pay that they agreed to. Okay. So first of all, right off the bat, that's not Marxist. That's not communist. That's just a private entity employing people to the amount that he wanted to employ them. Second of all, it's not Marxian, because in the end, the parable isn't actually about how economics ought to run. It's about how the kingdom of God operates. It's about the access to salvation. And so we can't take the parable and then use it to say this is how economics ought to run, when it's actually about how the kingdom of God operates and access to salvation. So that's all I would say about that.
What would you say, Josh? They're like, well, look at the early church and Acts. I mean, that's communism right there.
No, that you could say that's communal living. But first of all, in Acts chapter 5, you find that Peter tells Ananias and Sapphira, was not the land yours and you could do what you wanted with it when you had it? And wasn't the money yours and you could have given it, but you've blasphemed the Holy Spirit by lying? Is that they chose as a community voluntarily to care for one another in such a manner that they would sell things and they would care for one another that way, but it was still their private property. It was still their choice. And so the lesson of Ananias and Sapphira isn't make sure you give all of your things. If we all thought that was the lesson, then anybody who owns anything should just go sell all of their things and live homeless and give it to other people. Nobody thinks that's actually the lesson. The lesson is, if we're going to give, let's not give so that we can maintain status within the church, so that we can lie about what we have and have given so that we can look a certain way. We're blaspheming. We're blaspheming. Then we are lying to the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. So give with integrity. And second thing I would say to that is, if you fast forward in Acts a little bit longer, you can see that this communal living actually didn't work out all that well, because there were people in need that their needs weren't getting met. And so the church actually had to put together deacons to be able to help take care of people that all of a sudden they've sold everything and they don't have anything and they need help with things. And so it's not the same thing as communism. That's not what it is. Peter didn't stand from on high and say, now everybody sell all of your things and we're going to live as a communist utopia. And the last thing I'll say to that is, Marx wasn't a thing. Like, Marxism isn't based in Scripture. Marx wasn't a thing, and so to say that was communism is kind of anachronistic.
Yeah. Okay, I got a couple more here. Randal hammered on this a little bit. Trump is a convicted rapist. What would you say?
Yeah, well, he's not a convicted rapist, and Randal recognized that he was held liable for sexual assault. And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that case, but I would encourage people to just Google E. Jean Carroll interviews and see what E. Jean Carroll said about rape herself in an interview on CNN. She said, and I'm pretty sure this was her words, that people think rape is sexy, and that that's a fantasy that people have. And to me, that casts a little bit of is this accusation legitimate? I don't know if it is. Now, he was convicted for a sexual assault, although the jury was careful to say in their conviction that they did not think that he raped her, but that something happened. And he's held civilly liable, which civilly liable means it's just the preponderance of the evidence. It's not, you don't have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So you could still have a reasonable doubt and be held civilly liable. Yeah. And so now I'm not going to defend Trump's sexual past or his actions. I think they're abhorrent. I think he's a low character individual. I do not think he's a believer in Jesus Christ. I think that he's narcissistic. I think he has all sorts of character flaws and issues. And I'm sure that he has done things with women that I would think are disgusting and abhorrent. And I totally understand that in and of itself is enough to turn somebody off from voting for him just because of his policies. But I think that hopefully that would add some clarity there.
So you just thrashed Trump right there, and you're still going to vote for him. What's up with that?
Yeah, because I think that he proved to be an effective governor. And you know what? Chris Cuomo, not a fan of Trump, recently said in a video that what conservatives realize is that they are needing to vote for somebody to do a dirty job, and being president is a dirty job. And if you're sending someone into the jungle, you don't care if they're a savage. And there's a little bit of truth to that. Now, I wish he had impeccable character. I wish he had better character, but he doesn't. But his policies have reflected a governance character that I think is healthy for the nation.
Yeah, and good for our neighbors. And it's not just American neighbors. It seems to be good for, I mean, given the fact that we were, no new wars were started under Trump, but we had closest thing to world peace that we've had in a long time. And now we're on the verge of World War III. I mean, it seems like Trump is the best for our neighbors. Bill Barr understands this. Bill Barr is not a fan of Trump, used to work for Donald Trump, but he provides a great example of a guy who just, I mean, there's a lot of people that have worked with Trump that don't like him anymore. Bill Barr is one of these guys, does not like Donald Trump at all, but he's also committed to vote for him because he understands what's best for this nation and what's best for our neighbors. So check this out. Here's a conversation he had with a CNN reporter not too long ago. So Barr says, quote, "I'm disappointed that this country is stuck with this choice between two people who I don't think either of them should be president of the United States. But given that binary choice, I feel I have to choose Trump." And the CNN reporter says, but he's mocking you. And Barr says, so it's not about me. I love that. I mean, that is the epitome of selflessness. He's not being selfish with his vote right now. He's thinking about his neighbors. Barr says, so I don't care what Trump's saying about me. It's not about me. He says, if faced with a choice between two people, neither of which I think should be president, I feel it's my duty to pick the person who I think will do the least damage to the country. I think Trump will do less damage than Biden, or swap the name with Harris here. I think the real threat to democracy is the progressive movement and the Biden administration, and that includes Harris. So I think, Bill Barr obviously agrees with you there, Josh, and so do I. Two things can be true at once. We can recognize the problems with Trump's character and also say, you know what? Humanity flourished under his leadership last time. Humanity is not flourishing now under the Biden-Harris administration. And so to love our neighbors, the most prudent thing to do is to vote for Trump and Vance.
Yeah. Well, and to say the threat to democracy thing, I think it's a threat to democracy. So people have, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here, people have said, Trump has said there's an enemy within, and that's fascistic language. Bring that up. Trump has an enemy within. Well, if you read the oath of office, it says we will defend the Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic, right? So why does he bring up Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and the enemy within? And there are two reasons why, and I want to throw it real quick. Well, Adam Schiff propagated the Russiagate, Russian hoax for a really long time. He said, it's just a matter of time. We're going to get Trump out of office. The Steele dossier, all of that was debunked. That is kind of enemy within sort of attitudes to try to oust the sitting president on lies and disinformation and try to impeach him based on that Steele dossier, which was completely debunked eventually, and lying that he had the knockdown drag out argument for years. And then Nancy Pelosi was the nail in Joe Biden's figurative coffin to launch Kamala Harris into the presidency into presidential candidacy without any primary votes. She has never won a single primary vote ever in the history of her electoral aspirations. And all of a sudden, she is just anointed the anointed the presidential nominee. Now you can say, well, isn't she on the presidential ticket? And that's fine. The question is, if Biden isn't fit to run for president, why won't she 25th Amendment him? Why won't she say you're unfit in office right now? And then I can say, okay, yeah, you just take his place at the top of the ticket, just like anybody would have if the president is incapacitated.
Yeah.
But the fact that she maintains that he is still fit to run the country, that she maintains that he's as sharp as he's ever been, just as recently as last week, shows that if that is indeed the case, then you usurp the will of the people by pushing him out. So Pelosi did, so you can institute yourself as the Democratic nominee so you can have a better shot at winning. I don't know what's more anti-democratic than that, to try to install a candidate without the votes of the people so that you can have a better chance at winning. I guess what's more undemocratic is if you chose to ignore the results of this election and just say, you know what, actually, so-and-so is president. And if either side does that, I will denounce them 100%.
Yeah. Well, Randal actually messaged. Did he message us? He said something.
No, I just saw it. Yeah.
Okay, you saw something about. I haven't heard Trump say this, but he mentioned something about Liz Cheney last night. Even. Did you see this, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay, fill us in.
When you say he messaged us, are you referring to the tweet that he made?
I messaged Tim the tweet.
Oh,
it was a public tweet. I think Tim misunderstood. What I was doing. So no, Randal didn't message us, but he did refer to our debate in the tweet.
Okay.
So Trump talked about Liz Cheney last night, and so they take his quote out where he says, "Hey, what if she's staring down the barrel of 8 rifles? How much would she like it?" Or let me see if I can pull it up here on my computer so I can get it. He says, let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. Let's see how she feels about it, when the guns are trained on her face. Now, people came out, and Randal came out and said he's advocating for her to face an execution squad. But it's interesting, that entire part of his speech was him saying the Cheneys want wars. They're warmongers. They just want wars. And she wants wars, and she always wants to go to war with everybody. We'd be in war with 50 countries. He kind of over-exaggerates.
And that's one of the reasons why I left the Republican Party in 2007, was because I did not like the leadership of Bush and Cheney.
And so what he said was, she has no problem with sending our kids overseas to go fight wars, but how would she like it if she was the one sent overseas with guns in her face to fight a war? Maybe she would change her tune then. And how you know that is even in the quote that they take out, he says, let's put her with a rifle standing there. You don't give someone a rifle if they're going to be facing an execution squad. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Right.
The idea is, let's put her in a combat zone and see how much she loves war. That's what he's saying. But then people run with it. And Randal ran with it and said, see, this is the type of rhetoric I'm talking about.
And that is the epitome of running with misinformation. People that are not charitable at all, taking things out of context and then providing misinformation. Folks like Randal, I think, getting their source from, I would encourage them to get a source from a different outlet, but then taking that and running with this misinformation. I think it was disinformation. He got it, and now it's misinformation for him, if I'm understanding those terms correctly.
So Joe Walsh, who hates Trump, is not voting for Trump and is voting for Kamala Harris. So it's not just me saying that this is not Trump saying that. Joe Walsh said Trump did not call for Liz Cheney to be executed. This is what's wrong with our politics today. Look, you know how I feel about Trump, and I've been out there every day for 2 or 3 months campaigning my bleep off to help get Kamala Harris elected. But this short clip is so deceptive. Trump is not calling for Liz Cheney to be executed in front of a firing line. He's not. Listen to the entirety of what he said. Even Joe Walsh can say that. But what happens is when we call someone a Nazi, when we say he wants to execute his opponents, is it any surprise that there have been at least 2 attempts on his life?
Right.
And who knows what happens if he actually wins? How much does that ratchet up?
Yeah.
So that's a problem. And we say, well, Trump's rhetoric is a problem. I agree. There are things that Trump says that I don't like, and his rhetoric is a problem. But to pretend like Kamala Harris hasn't called him literally Hitler. Joe Biden's called him literally Hitler. And then Joe Biden put on a Trump 2024 hat. If you think someone is literally Hitler, you do not put on the literally Hitler hat.
Right.
You think Trump would wear a Hitler hat? Or I'm sorry, you think Biden would wear a Hitler hat? No, he wouldn't. So I don't even think they believe that Trump is literally Hitler, but that's what they need to say to say, see, he's really a fascist. Yeah. Sorry, I kind of got on a heater there. My apologies. Yeah.
Well, I think,
and this is not me disparaging Randal at all. Like, I like Randal. It was a fun conversation yesterday. I'm not calling him a liar, but I do just want to invite him. And he might say the same to me. He might say, you're always giving the most generous interpretation of Trump. And you know what? Maybe I am. But, you know, we've got to call it both ways. And I've been very hard on Trump on his rhetoric and on his pro-life stance. Tim, you've heard me. There are times where you're like, are you going to vote for Trump?
Yeah.
Like, well, you've wondered, right?
And there was, you know, so at one point, Trump made some comments about how he was going to vote regarding the abortion issue in Florida. And you contacted me about it. We talked about it. And I told you, I said, hey, write something on behalf of Free Thinking Ministries condemning Trump. Right. And you did. And we put out an official statement from Free Thinking Ministries condemning Trump. Well, the next day he backtracked because he actually listens to us.
Not because of us. Not because of us.
No, to the people,
maybe.
No, he might have. We can't prove it. He might. I think he might have just read that. Thank you.
There is a possible world.
There is
that Dr. Strange could have seen 1 out of a million.
The backlash from this is what I mean. The pro-life movement. When I say us, he listened to the pro-life movement and he backtracked. To his credit, right? And so I like that. But to your point, you were extremely critical of him then. And you know, one thing that we've said, and I've said, well, I hope Trump wins so that I can be his biggest critic from day one. You know, I'll do good Trump, bad Trump. When he deserves to be praised, I'll praise him. When he deserves to be criticized, I will criticize. And I've said that to you, and you're like, well, I'm already criticizing him. And I'm like, yeah, you are. You're doing a good job. But we think it's vital for Trump to win this election because of the other side. When you consider the alternative, Josh and I brought some justification for how bad the alternative to Trump is right now. Randal offered some defeaters to that justification. And now today was just devoted to defeating those defeaters and showing, hey, this is some misinformation here and we need to do some fact checking. And now
or at least, you know what, at least this information is incomplete, or there's another way of looking at it. So like, we're not calling Randal a liar or saying
not at all
saying that necessarily some of those things couldn't be the case. It's just there are other ways of looking at those things, and this is the way we see them. So
I think Randal has been lied to. I am not frustrated with Randal whatsoever. I think he's been lied to. I think where he is getting his news probably used to be a good source, and now it's probably not if he's regurgitating their talking points. But I don't think Randal is trying to be deceptive by any means. I think he's a pretty cool guy. So go ahead, Braxton, your show.
No, not today. Not today. But hey, guys, do we think we've said? It sounds like you guys are kind of.
I think so. Down. We're on 2 hours. Even if we had more, I don't think I have more to give.
Right.
Well,
no,
here's the thing.
I do have more, but I think it's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Well, here's an option. Is we could tell people if you'd like to, if you guys would want to do your own video or stream over on Free Thinking Ministries website. When you do it, if you do it, I'll put that link in the description for this video so that people that see this video can just go right over there and continue listening to you guys talk about this. So if you guys decide you want to do that, and the election is Tuesday, so you might do that. There you go. Otherwise, I'd like to say to Randal again, Randal, toward the beginning of this show, I sent you a link in DMs at Twitter that if you'd like to hop on this very show that we're doing right now, I was okay with that, but I wouldn't be surprised you didn't see that. I don't think you have seen that yet.
And Braxton, you okayed that with us. You said, what if he wants to jump on this show? I said, bring him on.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Tim and Josh both were agreeable to that. And I sent a message at, I think it was like 8:28 this morning, my time, to Randal telling him that There was a request to take care of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor yesterday, and that if he'd like to do that himself, if Randal, you would like to come on and have a conversation with me about this, that's very much like this, where I'm not interacting too much. I'm letting you make your points. May ask clarifying questions. That's fine. I don't want to do anything inappropriate with respect to the fact that we had a debate. So these are big issues, and these are obviously, we can tell. I don't. Maybe with Calvinism, the chat has been more divided than this, but there has been some division in the chat among even Christians, and so that has made for a lively chat, lively discussion, and I look forward to having more of those kind of things in the future if it becomes appropriate. But thanks so much, guys, for coming on, and you did me kind of a favor in one respect, because we had a nice stream here. There are people enjoying this community we have, and I didn't have to do that much work for this stream. So thank you guys so much for taking the wheel on this one, and maybe Randal will do the same thing. But check out Free Thinking Ministries. Also, I have all of Tim's books and Randal's books listed, links to their books and channels in the description. Go ahead, Tim.
I just want to end by saying, given the justification we've offered, the defeaters offered by Randal, and the defeaters to those defeaters, as it stands right now, the justification for the proposition, it is impossible for it's impossible for an informed and consistent Christ follower to cast a vote for Harrison Walls. I affirm that, and I think that position is justified.
Nice.
Josh, you want to say any closing remarks there?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun. It was a good discussion. I will admit that I might be wrong on some things. We all might.
Yeah.
But I wanted to offer that perspective. Yeah. And then finally, I saw Nick Quint in the chat earlier. He told me I had to plug the conversation I'm going to have with him. So I'm going to offer that. If you're sick of politics, next Friday, I'm going to have a conversation with Nick and Redeemed Zoomer on Free Thinking Ministries channel concerning women in the pastorate. So
that could instantly be like one of your biggest videos ever.
Yeah, and that could be more contentious than this one. Let's be honest.
Redeemed Zoomer is very, very popular.
Yeah. So I'll be doing that, and then actually Wednesday next week, I believe I'm having a conversation with Will Hess on our channel, and then Tim and I are going to have a post whenever the election results are finalized. We will have a reaction regardless of who wins, and it will not be as moribund as you think if Harris wins.
All right. Well, listen, guys, go ahead.
I just want to give Josh a round of applause, because isn't Josh awesome? I mean,
don't do that.
Come on. I mean, we put you in the hot seat today, and you were just hitting home run after home run. So, man, I'm just honored to be your colleague, brother. So, good job.
Okay,
adorable.
Put that picture back up, will you? There we go. That's what you get.
With that, we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.